Hello, Facebook. Hello from what is supposed to be maternity leave. I'm supposed to not be doing social media and enjoying these last 2 weeks before I give birth to my daughter. I'm huge. I feel like I'm huge at least. Very exciting times. But obviously, I wanted to come back and just do a video talking about today, talking about this historic decision and talking about all of these protests that are going to follow, which are quite meaningless because the decision has already been made. But, we live in a time where people think that throwing temper tantrums when they don't get what they want is appropriate. I want to make this video particularly to women that are pro-choice, and I hope that if you are pro-choice, you'll listen to this with an open heart. And if you're pro-life, that you will just simply share it in the hopes that somebody who is pro-choice does see it. I have always been very sympathetic and empathetic to women that are pro-choice because I used to be pro-choice for the majority of my life. I was pro-choice until I was 25 years old, almost, maybe a little before, a little after, before I got into politics and started really doing my own research and kind of getting out of what I would describe to be the cultural and the educational bubble, meaning that I went to public school my entire life. There is one side of this political argument that is presented at public schools, and it is pro-choice. I went off to college and took a feminism course, and there is one side that is presented when you go off to university, and it is pro-choice. The concept of my body, my choice, a phrase that I don't even know where it came from, was supplanted into my head before I even had a thought or an understanding of my own. I never learned about adoption in school. I actually grew up in a time when I learned that it was a clump of cells and it wasn't even a baby. And so when I went to college, girls that I was very close with got abortions, and I know what these women went through, and I find the arguments that come from the pro-life side to be just sometimes not even arguments and just very unsympathetic to the fact that women are actively learning that this is a choice. They're actively learning that this isn't a baby. And when you say to those young women that you're a murderer, right? You're just a murderer. It's not helpful because you're not understanding that these women are brainwashed. I was brainwashed for years throughout school intentionally by an education system, by programs that were put into place by Planned Parenthood beginning in the 1970s to believe that it was just a clump of cells and that having a lot of sexual activity was fine as a young female, and that abortion was no different than like a more drastic form of birth control. Not only that, but I learned that it was the responsible thing to do. So I've always tried to understand that mindset of a woman because I know these women that went and got abortions, and I know that these are not terrible human beings that are murderers. What I say to pro-choicers, if you're still pro-choice, is I want you to be realistic about why you're pro-choice, and I want you to be sincere in your arguments of why you're pro-choice, right? It is foolish to say that this is about protecting women's rights. As I said, I have about 6 friends that have gotten abortions, and out of 6 of them, 5 of them were not doing it because it was their choice, but were doing it because they had pressure from boyfriends, because they had pressure from parents, or because they were scared. These are women in their most vulnerable states that they could possibly be in. They're not doing this because they think, oh, I just don't want to have a kid. They're doing this because pressure is coming from all around them. They have teachers that are telling them that their lives will be ruined if they have a child too soon and they don't have the economic standing to have a child. In many circumstances, they have boyfriends who never wanted the children and who are demanding that they get an abortion. I have been in situations where people in my family have had boyfriends that have broken into their homes demanding that they get an abortion. Domestic violence follows a lot of these situations. You have seen circumstances in the news recently where a woman in Philadelphia was shot at her baby shower by her baby daddy because he didn't want to have the child. This is the more typical circumstances of women getting an abortion. It is something that is done out of fear. These women are terrified when they go to these clinics. These women are crying when they come out of these clinics. These women are not doing this as some form of freedom. So I wish that if you are going to be legitimate about the pro-choice movement, you would acknowledge that this is not something that is about reproductive freedom or helping women. My second hope is that you would acknowledge the true history of this in talking about how this benefits men in their ability to demand of women that they get an abortion, that they take this option. Many women who are scared and who are vulnerable, that you recognize that this decision was made by men, entirely made by men. The Supreme Court decision was passed by 7 white men. It is completely foolish for people to be a pro-choicer and to pretend that this is setting women's rights back when women were never able to speak on this issue in the first place. It was decided by men. The textbooks were then written by men, and orchestrated by men to convince them that this was the right thing to do. And women are still living under this delusion that somehow women's rights are being reversed when these were never rights that were decided by women, including the woman that was at the core of Roe v. Wade in the first place, who reversed her decision and, ended her life saying that she was pro-life and felt that this decision was wrong. That was made on her behalf. So you can look into the history of that. Another thing that really bothers me about the pro-choice movement is this failure to recognize the history. And you see a lot right now across social media. People are saying this is a racist decision. I'm specifically calling out Amy Schumer, who alleged that this was what slave holders would have wanted. First and foremost, I think people are really getting tired. I know I certainly have been tired for a long time, but I'm hopeful that after the Black Lives Matter riots, that Black America is waking up to this thing, that when white privileged women want something, they somehow they say, well, if I don't get it, it's racist. That's a ridiculous circumstance. If you are going to put on your profile, please donate to Planned Parenthood, because this decision has been overturned, then I expect you as a pro-choicer to recognize the true history of Planned Parenthood, to recognize that it was created by a eugenicist, that the entire concept of abortion was created during the progressive era. A woman, largely led by Margaret Sanger at the time that they were also performing appendectomies to Black people to make sure that they couldn't give birth, who wanted to use abortion as a mechanism to get rid of undesirables. So if they thought that a certain class of people should not procreate, and you can go back and you could read Margaret Sanger's writings, they were considered unfit in society. Black people, they did not want them to procreate and have families, so they encouraged them to get abortions and told them that this was the right decision for them to make. It wasn't just Black people, by the way. During that time, it was largely people that were from Southern Europe. Italians were considered undesirables, as well as the east of Europe as well, that were coming into the country, and they were fearful that if these people began to mate and have children, that it would drive down the Nordic race. And there was a book at that time that was the most popular book, which was written by Madison Grant, and it was called The Passing of the Great Race. The entire abortion industry was created around the idea of eugenicism. Planned Parenthood is a racist organization, and they have been successful. You can't just say, oh, well, it changed going forward. She wrote down what her plans were, what her models were, why abortion needed to be taking place, so that you had people that weren't worthy of having children to be able to reproduce. You can't just magically pretend that didn't happen and say, oh, well, then I learned in school, but now it's my body, my choice. Acknowledge the true history, the true abhorrent history of what the abortion industry is, what it was intended to do, and what it has largely been successful in doing. I think Margaret Sanger is one of the most successful progressives that has ever lived, because she set out to do exactly what has been accomplished. Over 18 million Black babies have been aborted. The Black population would be double today had it not been for Planned Parenthood, had it not been for abortion. And the truth is that Planned Parenthood clinics are 70% of them are in minority neighborhoods. Now, you may find that fact checkers on the internet will say that that's not true, and that they looked at a study and saw, and this is what they will say, and this is how tricky they are because they want to obscure the truth, that the majority of places that perform abortion performing services are not primarily in minority neighborhoods. Specifically, I'm talking about Planned Parenthood clinics. When you say abortion performing services, you're talking about every single hospital, and they try to widen that map and pretend that, oh, well, no, see, look, hospitals are also here, and all these clinics are here. No, Planned Parenthood clinics, the majority of them are in majority minority neighborhoods. And that, again, is something that was intended. Again, I am not going to fault you if you hear all of these things and you say, well, I'm still pro-choice, it doesn't matter. But you have to be honest about your arguments. Be sincere in your arguments. Don't pretend this is about a woman's choice. This is about a woman being peer pressured. Don't pretend this is not a life. This is another thing, learning that it was a clump of cells. Pregnant now. And during my first pregnancy, when I was 7 weeks, and I went in, and because they have this, 5D technology where you can zoom in on the baby, I saw my baby's arms dancing and his legs dancing, and I broke down crying, just because of the elation, but also a quiet sadness in realizing that my entire life I had been lied to throughout the education system, that I was unintentionally raised up in an educational cult that wanted me to be the opposite of what a woman should be. I believe firmly that our role as women is to defend children, is to raise children, is to love children, to nurture children, to protect them from evil in this world. And when women are out on the front lines demanding a right to end the life of children that they perceive to be inconvenient, we have to accept that we have been brainwashed into a cult. That's it. And it is difficult for me to even speak this now, as I'm due to give birth in 2 weeks, because I think to feel this child kicking inside of me, to feel this little girl kicking inside of me, and then to hear women say that they believe that this isn't a life, that should be valued, to already know that I know my daughter's personality like I knew my son's personality in the womb. I knew exactly who my son was. It's so spiritual. It is so above politics, this connection that women have with children. And it starts long before you're holding a child in your stomach. It starts when you're a kid and you are holding a baby doll and you're nurturing it. It starts when you watch little toddler girls taking care of their little brothers and being so careful. It is above politics. It's who we are as spiritual beings. And so many of us have that spirituality systematically removed from us in the school system before we even get a chance to form our own thoughts. Again, I feel like I'm talking to you as a former member of that cult of pro-choiceness, and I do say this empathetically because I think it's sad when you look around and you see so many women that don't realize that fighting for life is all that matters when we're talking about the life of a child and the chance to live, and to really understand that using extreme arguments to say, oh, but what if, if a woman is raped, then this should be, we should only be arguing according to women that are raped. Well, let me tell you something. Of the 6 friends that I know that had an abortion, nobody was raped. People were having unprotected sex, because what's the point of practicing safe sex when you're being systematically taught in the school system that it doesn't matter? You can just go get an abortion. It's easy. It's become a form of birth control. And we need to acknowledge that honestly and openly, that the reason these abortions are happening is not because tons of women are getting raped. It's because tons of women are being irresponsible along with their partners, and because tons of men don't want to raise up and be responsible, and they just say to women, go get an abortion. So many of these women are affected long after they get these abortions. I've received tons of letters from these women, and I want to welcome those women to the pro-life movement. Like, you can change your mind. You can have had an abortion, and you can be a spokesperson for the pro-life movement. You don't have to permanently be a person that pickets for these extreme organizations that demand a right to abort a child 9 months in the womb. And that's what's going to happen, unfortunately. In closing, what I think is going to happen now, obviously, is first and foremost, it will be sent down to the states. Women that want to get abortions will cross state lines. Women that are living in liberal states and governments, bodies in these liberal states like New York City are going to pass very extreme abortion laws, probably until the kid's 3 years old, and say it's your child, your choice. And then the opposite will happen in red states. They will ban abortions. And I think what will be interesting will be to look at the data. It will be interesting to look at red states that choose to ban abortion outright, and to see whether or not it curbs teen pregnancies, whether or not just knowing that it's not an option makes women pursue safer sex, makes women say, actually, okay, if the outcome of this is going to be a child, I need to be very serious about the partners that I have. We've become such a promiscuous society, that people don't take their relations seriously at all, and they feel that it's up to the government to take care of that when they make poor decisions, take care of it, and it has contributed to the circumstance that we're in today. We are honestly, America is out of control when it comes to abortion. We have abortion policies that mirror North Korea. Nowhere else in the world is like this. My husband is English. He looks at these women in America and thinks that are marching and demanding to, trying to kill Supreme Court justices, and thinks that they're rabid. And he's correct. Something has gone amiss in America. It was time to pull this back, and it's time for us to have more honest and open conversations. So if you are pro-choice, I hope that you listen and just are willing to have an open conversation. If you are pro-life, I hope that you share this video, because there could be someone who's like me and doesn't, has never even considered any of these points and just needs to hear a different perspective that is a bit more empathetic than being called a murderer. So thank you guys for watching, share, and I'm going to go have this baby.